Good morning. I'm going to start off with a speech by Sojourner Truth titled, Ain't I a Woman? Well, children, there seems to be so much racket. There must be something out of kilter. I think it was the Negroes of the South and the women of the North all talking about rights. The white men will be in a fix pretty soon. But what's all this here talking about? That man over there, he says women need to be helped into carriages and lifted over ditches, and they need the best place everywhere. Nobody ever helps me into carriages or over mud puddles or gives me the best any place. And ain't I a woman? Look at me. Look at my arm. I have plowed and planted and gathered into barns, and no man could head me. And ain't I a woman? I could work as much and eat as much as a man when I could get it, and bear the lash as well. And ain't I a woman? I have borne 13 children and seen them most all sold off to slavery. And when I cried out with my mother's grief, none but Jesus heard me. And ain't I a woman? Then they talk about this thing in the head. What's that they call it? Intellect. That's it, honey. What's that got to do with the women's rights or Negroes' rights? If my cup won't hold but a pint and yours a quart, wouldn't you be mean not to let me have my half measure full? Then that little man in the black there, he says women can't have as much rights as men because Christ wasn't a woman. Where did your Christ come from? From God and a woman. Man had nothing to do with him. If the first woman God ever made was strong enough to turn the world upside down all alone, these women together ought to be able to turn it back right. And now they're asking to do it. The men better let them. That speech was given in Akron, Ohio in 1851 at the Women's Rights Convention. Sojourner Truth was born into slavery as Isabella Baumfree in Swaterville, New York in 1797. She escaped to freedom in 1826, and throughout her life she fought as an abolitionist and for women's rights. Ladies and gentlemen, ain't I a woman? Am I not a woman? I'm a black woman. My mom made me recite Sojourner Truth in church when I was a little girl. I really did not understand much of what I was saying at the time. Simply that Sojourner wanted to be treated as an equal. She wanted to be treated fairly. I think at that point I already understood the context that black slaves in America were not treated fairly. So I thought that that was all she was asking. When I first started contemplating doing this sermon, that is where I wanted to start. Reading it and speaking it, again, 30 years later, as an adult who has lived and experienced the world, I have a deeper understanding. Ain't I a woman carries more weight for me now. Now that I have lived as a black woman in America, I know that my experience is different than that of a white woman in America because I've lived it. Sojourner's speech is still relevant and informing in 2017. I don't normally do sermons, but I felt compelled to share a few things after the Women's March. Someone asked me if I went, if I'd gone. And I said no, my children were sick that weekend. And I kind of hid behind that, and I was then ashamed that I had to hide behind that excuse. The truth is, there was something in me that did not feel compelled to go to the march. And the deep truth is that I may not go to the next march. I fully support the intentions of the march and the necessity of the march, but that is not my thing. I do not believe that this is where I give my best self to the struggle. I've spent some time toiling with this, and I'm okay with it, and I need you to be okay with it too. I don't feel comfortable showing up at a march and yelling. That's not who I am. It's not who I am. I choose to fight the injustices that have been made against the oppressed in other ways. My mother calls them the uglies in life. I am a black woman, but I'm also an engineer. In my day job, I do analyses on GPS equipment, telescopes, and satellites. These systems are launched into outer space. My job is to find the weaknesses in these system designs and anticipate potential failure modes that may compromise the mission. I then work with the design team to mitigate these weaknesses and/or prevent them altogether. The equipment I work on travels to places that most men and women will never see in this lifetime, save the images that are sent back from these systems. I need you to understand and appreciate that what I do in my job is actually hard, and there's a reason that many people cannot do it. Getting to school and through school was difficult. Showing up to work every day and doing what I do and being a black woman is actually difficult. According to the NSF 2010 statistics, only 2% of the science and engineering workforce were black women. I need you to understand or think about what it's like to be the only one. Speaking up and being heard at my job is difficult. I have to work very hard to show up just to be second-guessed, knowing that some of your coworkers don't think you belong there, that perhaps you're just a token black female and perhaps a result of affirmative action. The workplace becomes hostile when you pull up in a parking lot next to the car with a bumper sticker that says, "Trump that bitch." You begin to take it personal when you are the only one. It makes me second guess whether I should really be there. But I am there. I still show up with all my blackness and all my womanliness, and I do the damn thing. Honestly, I feel as though my very existence is an act of defiance and resistance. I am who I am in spite of every dismal statistic that depicts black people in a lesser than savory light in this country. Many people became, quote unquote, woke for the first time on the morning of November 9th, 2016. They found that a country they love had let them down. The country I love has let me and my people down many times before. I have had to be woke all my life. My fight is elsewhere. I'm one of the few black female engineers in the nation launching things into outer space. I am in school showing little black and brown children that they can be more than what society tells them they can be and expects of them. I use my voice when necessary to speak up for those who have not been heard. I make sure my children are woke as well. I fight with my mind and my deeds. There are many ways to fight for what we believe in. Some of us show up at marches and rallies. Others write letters or checks. We are all part of the struggle. We all play a role, but each of us has to play a role that is honest and authentic with whom we are. My mother had me out on the picket line before I could walk or talk. She equipped me with a thirst for knowledge. She gifted me with an exposure to an arsenal of tools that I can fight with. My weapon of choice has been my mind. Everyone has a talent or strength that they can leverage in the good fight. I understand that the past month or months have been shocking and have outraged us as a nation, as a community. Our families and our very personal sense of being has been affronted. We are scared and our children are scared. But hear this. Instead of responding to the urgency of the latest assault on your being, sensibilities and sense of right and wrong, I urge you to take the long view. I am the descendant of slaves, Africans who were stolen from their land, brought here and forced to work someone else's land under a host of inhumane conditions. I am also a Massachusetts Ponkapong. I'm named Tyanita, which means young beaver. I am a daughter of this land, a daughter of the earth, amongst daughters of the dust. James Baldwin reminds us that history is not the past, it is the present. We carry our history with us. We are our history. If we pretend otherwise, we are literally criminals. Change, particularly social change, does not happen overnight. Seeds are planted throughout time. There are many victories and many setbacks. Throughout time in history, change has pushed us forward. The 24-hour news cycle and inventions such as Facebook amplify the illusion that the isolated insult and affront of the day are all that matters. But the events today are not isolated. They are connected to wins and losses that were realized long before there was a Facebook. We reap the benefits of the seeds that have been planted and sown long before. And I would like to give you the Arab Spring as an example. There was a comic book about Martin Luther King and civil disobedience that was translated to Arabic, and it was distributed throughout Egypt. King's civil disobedience was informed by Gandhi's tactics. Gandhi was inspired by Tolstoy and acts of non-cooperation of British women suffragists. The Arab Spring did not happen all at once. It began long before Muhammad Bouazizi set himself on fire in an act of protest. This movement is still ongoing today, and the profound results may not be realized for decades or maybe centuries. The idea of another quote, in America, to make America great, is not new. Nigger, welfare queen, criminal, black criminal. These are derogatory names that have embodied the idea of an other. And there are many more that have been used throughout our history. These are terrible and ugly words and ideas, but they are ours. They are American as apple pie. We should own them and understand what they mean when used, especially in the context to oppress and demean. Words and ideas used to oppress and prop up the order of way things should be in America. The idea that America is only great if there is a ruling class on top. This weekend brings a close to Black History Month, and March will bring us Women's History Month. These months have been designated because there is so much that these groups have given to this country to build this country and are simply not mentioned or watered down in K through 12 education and in the mainstream media. I urge you not to just think of it as Black History Month or Women's History Month. This is American history. It is a lineage that we all benefit from, that we all connect to. It is our history. We need to own it, to know it, and embrace it. The power and struggles, the successes and failures, in all its beauty and ugliness is all ours. Outrage will cause us to react. It gets us fired up and on the front lines. Anger, outrage are necessary to bring about positive change. It ignites the flame in the fight, but I do not believe it can sustain us. I do believe the political agenda and attack on our values by the new administration will give us many reasons for outrage over the next few years, but I also believe that outrage can putter out. So what will keep us going? because this is going to be a long, hard fight. Once again, I reflect on my ancestors who were dehumanized and brought here against their will. How did they get up every day? Why go on? How is it possible to go on? And the only thing that I can come to is hope. It had to be hope that sustained them, hope that someday things will get better, if not for them, for their children, or for their children's children. I believe that there is also an innate human will of some sort to survive. But I also have to believe that it was hope that sustained them in their darkest hour. I recently stumbled on the concept of radical hope by way of Junot Diaz. He said that radical hope is not so much something you have, but something you practice. It demands flexibility and openness. Also, from Hope in the Dark by Rebecca Solnit, she writes, hope locates itself in the premise that we don't know what will happen and that in the spaciousness of uncertainty is room to act. When you recognize uncertainty, recognize that you may not be able to influence the outcomes. You alone or you in concert with a few dozen or several million others. Hope is an embrace of the unknown and the unknowable. It is the belief that what we do matters, even though how and when it may matter, who it may impact, are things we cannot know beforehand. History is full of people whose influence was most powerful after they were gone. It would be completely disingenuous of me to stand here and tell you that I am the most excellent, dopest, fantastic black female engineer you ever met. Maybe I am. We plant seeds throughout our lives, seeds that have been planted throughout the history of the world. Sojourner Truth played a part in my story when she stood up for women and black people in the mid-19th century. When Susan B. Anthony and Frederick Douglass fought for abolition and women's rights, although not perfectly, I'm here because of them and many more. I gave you Sojourner Truth today because my mom gave her to me 30 years ago. I became an engineer because a woman named Phyllis Major, the first engineer I ever met, she took time to nurture my interests when I was a young girl. She has since passed, but her legacy and all that she was lives through me. In my Soul Matters group this week, we talked about why some of us feel like we are still growing up, still finding ourselves. One of us asked why it seems so easy that for some folks to find themselves or their footing in the world. One of us posed that perhaps they were just doing their best with what they have at this moment. I posed that perhaps they're just complacent and too accepting of what is their current situation, that perhaps they're not doing the work to find themselves or to evolve. If you are comfortable in your place in a system which systematically oppresses the other, if you're not explicitly working to undo a system of oppression, chances are you are a complacent part of the system. I urge you to break down the norms, to break down this system. If you're not uncomfortable, there is work to be done. Do the work. Fight. Stand up for the oppressed. Do it in your own way, but do the work. Also, from Hope in the Dark, Americans are good at responding to crises, then going home and letting another crisis brew, both because we imagine that the finality of death can be achieved in life. It's called happily ever after in personal life or saved in politics. And because we tend to think political engagement is something just for emergencies rather than, as people in many countries have imagined it, as a part of everyday life, the problem seldom goes home. Do not go home after the march and figure you have fought the good fight, that we are done. The work is not done. We are excellent at reacting and responding to setbacks, as in this moment in time. But we sometimes trip up. When there are victories, we celebrate the job well done. We go home, we make a sandwich, as if life and work is done. The work is not done. We have to stick with it. We have to take the long view and stick with it. Yes, it is important to march for what is right, to stand up for your beliefs and the oppressed in our society. It is great that there is discourse and discussion on Facebook, but we have to go out and do the work. We cannot be complacent. We cannot be shiftless. If there is bigotry in your child's school, have you emailed the principal? Does your workplace look less than diverse? If you are in a position of influence, are you going out of your way to influence the hiring practices, to push your coworkers to look beyond their networks to diversify the workplace? Do the work. Push yourselves beyond your comfort zones. Use your influence to push others beyond their comfort zones. Raise an army. Teach your neighbors who are new to the work what the issues are. Give them the knowledge and tools to fight. Do the work. Do the work with yourselves. Do the work within your families. Do the work in the community. Why isn't the righteous voice of the liberal more fully represented in our county government? Why are they not more fully representing the plight and voice for those who need it most? Why is it Rochester versus the county? Do the work. Complacency is not acceptable. It is not. Do the work. I've been doing the work for a long time. The current political climate was an issue. Before the current political climate was an issue or concern, I was doing the work, and I will continue to do the work. I do not have a choice. Do the work with me. In an interview recently, Elizabeth Alexander spoke on how the philosophy of Black women can inform us right now. Quote, "When you think about what it is to come from no position of presumed power, what does it mean to start off as 3/5 of a human being in the eyes of the law and still find your way in a meaningful way in the populace? What does it mean to survive when you're not supposed to survive?" And I'm going to close with a poem by Lucille Clifton called "Won't You Celebrate With Me?" Won't you celebrate with me what I have shaped into a kind of life I had no model? Born in Babylon, both non-white and woman, what did I see to be except myself? I made it up, here on this bridge between starshine and clay, my one hand holding tight my other hand. Come celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill me and has failed. Thank you.